Okay, let's go to the U.S. Supreme Court. There is a case that's coming up soon. It's out of Colorado, and it involves this attempted ban by Colorado on, quote, conversion therapy. This is something they used to do like in the 50s when a kid said he was gay. They try to talk him out of being gay. You're not gay. You're straight. Be straight. Don't be gay. And, it's really kind of tough to talk somebody out of being gay. And the Colorado law, though, is not really, it technically does get at that, but that's not really happening in today's day and age. They're really getting at therapists who want to talk to kids who say they're trans about whether they are really trans, or whether they're upset because their parents are getting a divorce, or whether they have an eating disorder that's manifesting in some sort of bodily, sensitivity that they're mistaking for gender confusion. That's basically banned now, thanks to this Colorado law. It's a crazy law because it basically stops a therapist from being a therapist. And perfectly in line, by the way, with what the American Psychiatric Society and the pediatrics groups are telling these therapists to do anyway, which is affirm. Don't do any good faith searching of the child's actual issues. It's crazy. But Colorado wrote it down and put it in law and made it actually like a law that you cannot discuss, possibly telling the kid he is the gender that he was born, the sex that he was born, and not going down the conversion lane of let's do another gender. So this therapist has filed the lawsuit saying this violates, her name is Chiles, saying you violating my free speech rights here because that's what I do, talk therapy. And you are telling me, like as a matter of law, that I can't say certain things and I have to say other things. So I'll start with you on this, Dave. How is she wrong?
Well, first, I think the Supreme Court is going to rule in her favor. And we had experience with this here in Palm Beach County, where there was a local ordinance that banned conversion therapy when it came to sexual orientation. And it was found by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeal in a divided panel that was unconstitutional, and the local county had to pay up. I don't know if that extended to gender identity. I would take issue on, I do think that, at least personally, even though the court's going to rule opposite, I do think that when you have these therapists out there who are essentially saying you can pray the gay away, I think that's just hooey. I think that's just a quack. And I do think the state can regulate healthcare like in other areas and can say, no, we're not going to let you do it, because at the same time, we're not going to let like a doctor urge a lung cancer patient to take up smoking. And that was actually in the brief for Colorado. So I think when it comes to that, I actually think Colorado has a good argument there. But when it comes to gender identity, I understand that when you are about to do something that could have a permanent change in your life, have permanent ramifications, then I can see how that would be different. So I do think the court's going to rule for the therapist here, but I would disagree when it comes to sexual orientation.
Me too, because here's the status of it, Phil. The district court in Colorado rejected the therapist's request to stop the state from enforcing this law against her. And then she appealed. It went up to a divided 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit. And the 10th Circuit upheld the district court ruling. So she lost again. And they said this law primarily regulates conduct, not speech, professional conduct. And therefore, it's not constitutional. And the Supreme Court took it up. The Supreme Court could have said, we let it stand, the 10th Circuit decision, but they didn't. They said, give us a shot at it. And I totally agree with Dave that they are going to say, you guys got it wrong, and this therapist cannot be hamstrung by the law telling her she can't therapize the kid the way she sees fit.
So I'm going to break some news to you and maybe to the world here, because most people maybe don't know this. There are actually a lot of people who go to work and put on black robes in America who are true nut jobs. And that explains why we have a lot of these lower court rulings that are flat contrary to the law. The First Amendment is really, really clear here. You can't go inside the treatment room or the therapist's office and dictate to a therapist who uses talk therapy, that's the tools of her trade. If a person comes in there and says, look, I have these issues that are, gender dysphoria issues. I don't like feeling this way. I want you to help me feel a different way. The state of Colorado is going to come in and say, no, it's illegal for you to do that. The only thing you can do is affirm their feelings that they say they do not want. So if you're a therapist and someone comes into your office and says, I want you to help me try to feel a different way, to feel like maybe the gender I was at birth, right? My birth gender. I don't like feeling this way. Will you help me? You're going to have to say, no, I can't, because they're going to take my license. They're going to take my livelihood. How that is not a violation of free speech and probably other things, I don't know. I think the Supreme Court is going to obviously rule. I agree with Dave. They're going to rule in favor of the plaintiff here. I disagree with Dave a little bit because I think Colorado's entire argument is specious. Of course, the states can regulate therapists and doctors, but this goes beyond mere regulation. This is getting into the sanctity of that relationship between a therapist and a patient. These people can come into the doctor or to the therapist and say, I've got this real issue. I want your help. The therapist has to be able to legally help them with what they state their issue is and what they want help with. It's just really simple.
It's crazy. This is genuinely endangering children, this law. I mean, it's going to be thrown out. Thank God we have the Supreme Court. We do. I will say Colorado's arguing that the only thing the law prohibits therapists from doing is performing a treatment that seeks the predetermined outcome of changing a minor's gender identity. Because they're saying, we're only going to come after you, therapists, if when the kid walks in there, you're saying in your head, no way am I letting this kid change genders. That's not a thing, which is the correct thing to do, by the way. But I just don't think that's going to be upheld, even if the court believes that's all it would encompass. And it's going to be very hard for Colorado to prove. That was in her head. She had it predetermined versus she did an open searching examination with the child and then determined this isn't a real case of gender confusion. Anyway, I think this thing's going away. Let's keep going. Another case involving the trans issue, I think, is going up. Dave, you're going to tell me what's going to happen now, because there's two cases on the trans athletes, boys crossing into girls' sports. One is out of Idaho, one's out of West Virginia. And what happened in Idaho is there was a law that banned all trans kids, meaning boys pretending to be girls, from participating in or even trying out for girls' sports in the public schools, K through 12. It was signed in 2020 by the current governor out there, Brad Little. Again, this is Idaho. It was the first state to pass such a law, so good on them. And this young boy claiming to be a girl, who's now a freshman at university, says, I've been hurt by this. I wanted to play the girls' sports and I wasn't allowed. I intended to try out for women's track and cross country and I couldn't because of this law. And so I'm suing. Now, the district court issued a preliminary injunction against the law saying this isn't constitutional. Idaho, you can't do this. Then it went up to the very liberal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and they said, yeah, we side with the district court. You can't do this to young boys pretending to be girls. They have a right to try to get on the girls' team. And then Idaho appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States, and they took the case. Again, that's another good sign for team sanity. And then the plaintiff, the boy pretending to be a girl, requested that the lawsuit be dropped because he knows, as well as we know, the high court is going to side with us, meaning team sanity, and there is no way they are going to reverse this Idaho law. So, Dave, what does the Supreme Court do? Because the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a great group, which is defending Idaho in part, has said, oh, hell no, you can't do this. You cannot drop it. You know, this is a live issue that's going to be coming over and over and over again. You need to hear the case.
Right. Well, they also have that West Virginia case. So they're going to hear both, I think. And I think the reason is because the Supreme Court wants to rule in this area, as does Idaho. They want the Supreme Court 6-3 conservative majority to weigh in here. This was a mistake by the transgender legal advocates when it came to the Scrimeti case. Remember, that was a big deal. There was a press conference. We're going to go to the Supreme Court and we're going to stand up for transgender rights when it came to Tennessee's gender affirming care. And the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 against the plaintiffs. They ruled for Tennessee that you can ban gender affirming care for underage individuals. And it was a big loss for the transgender community. And they see that happening now when it comes to sports. And so now I do see that as the reason why they're trying to back away from this. They are saying, well, let's give in. Let's not let the Supreme Court rule, because that would be a national ruling that would have huge ramifications. So I do think the Supreme Court's going to rule on it. I think it'll be 6-3 again, just like in the Scrimeti ruling. And I think we'll have lasting implications.
I agree. Now, wait, Felt, do you want to weigh in quickly? Because I do want to get to one other case.
Yeah, real quick. I think what's getting lost here, everything these plaintiffs are talking about is that, their 14th Amendment rights are being violated. It's the rights of the girls on the team to play same-sex sports, right? It's their choice. They have the right to free association under the First Amendment. They signed up and they choose to be part of an all-girls team. You can't force them to accept a boy on their team, because that violates their First Amendment rights. So you have, I think, a very compelling interest here for the U.S. Supreme Court to step in and say, you know what? Freedom of association means something, and if these women, these girls on these sports teams, if they want to play all girls sports, the government has to protect it. I think that's what's going to happen.
I mean, I feel like if you're a transgender activist, you'd rather have the Idaho case in front of the court than the West Virginia one, because in the West Virginia one, there's allegations. They're just allegations. We have to hear whether there's a denial. But the allegation is that the trans athlete there allegedly was saying to at least one of the girls who was a teammate of his when he was on her team, "You can suck my D," this person said to her, that they made many other more explicit statements like, "I'm going to stick my D into your whatever," and sometimes added, and also this other place as well, that she allegedly told her parents and told her coach and the school's administration. The school said it was investigating, but she never heard back. The girl is claiming she can name 6 students, or did name, who could corroborate her allegations. This is not a case that the trans lobby wants going in front of Samuel Alito. It's not going to end well.
And Megyn, also in that case, was West Virginia case, the athlete won the shot put competition by more than 3 feet, whereas in the Idaho case, the athlete was worse than the women and couldn't even make the team. So yeah, you're right. I do think the West Virginia case is going to be worse for the transgender community.